So tonight's speakers will touch upon the issues that lay ahead and what needs to be done to combat this new reality of pipelines, resource sellouts, and the race to the bottom for Canada. Our second speaker tonight is going to be Maude Barlow. She needs no introduction, but I'm going to do it anyway. So, Maude Barlow is the national chairperson of the Council of Canadians. She chairs the board of Washington-based Food and Water Watch. She is a founding member of the San Francisco-based International Forum on Globalization and a counselor with the Hamburg-based World Future Council. Maude is the recipient of 11 honorary doctorates, as well as many awards that include the 2005 Right Livelihood Award, known as the Alternative Nobel Prize, the Citation of Lifetime Achievement at the 2008 Canadian Environment Awards, the 2009 Earth Day Canada Outstanding Environmental Achievement Award, the 2009 Planet in Focus Eco Hero Award, and the 2011 Earth Care Award. From 2008 to 2009, Maude served as a senior advisor on water to the 63rd President of the United Nations General Assembly and was a leader in the campaign to have water recognized as a human right at the UN. She is also the author of dozens of reports, as well as 16 books, including the international bestseller Blue Covenant, The Global Water Crisis, and the Coming Battle for the Right to Water. I'd like to welcome Maude Barlow to the stage.
Wow. You have warmed up this room in my heart. Thank you so, so much. Thank you, Pina, and thank you, Gary, and thank you, all of you, for being here tonight. This is an incredible turnout. Thank you for the very warm welcome to your territory. Chief Douglas White, a delight to be on this panel with Linda McQuaig, who's a long-term friend of the Council, friend of mine, friend of justice in Canada. The wonderful Bill McGibbon, he doesn't like when people say this, but who led the fight to derail the Keystone Pipeline in the United States, and is one of the early voices, was one of the early voices in his country and in the world, sounding the alarm on climate. We're awaiting and hoping he'll be here. Grand Chief Stuart Phillip, he got caught in a late ferry, so we have our fingers crossed that he'll be here, but I'm delighted to be in the presence of these wonderful friends. I want to say a special shout out to the people fighting the Raven coal mine here. You mean so much to us. I mean, it is an incredible fight, and it's an incredible thought that they could conceive of putting a coal mine in this community, in the heart of one of the most beautiful places on earth. And we stand with you 100% in this struggle. And this, as the pipeline, this coal mine, we will win this coal mine fight. What was in Vancouver or Victoria for the event on Monday, it was absolutely wonderful. We think somewhere anywhere between 4,500, 5,500 people came out, and it was a cold, wet day. Hundreds and hundreds of us were prepared to get arrested, but the police wouldn't play ball. So it was really quite a fun kind of moment, all told. It was just, you just had no choice but to kind of take a deep breath and say, okay, well, we'll have a different kind of day. But it struck me very, very strongly that the intent of so many people to put their lives and their bodies on the line so early in this struggle is an incredibly important sign for us that we are going to take this struggle forward and we're going to win. And I was in Fort McMurray the next evening, and I was very glad I went because the Athabasca Chippewa First Nation has launched a constitutional challenge against proposed expansion of the Jack Pine operation of Shell Oil, one of the worst companies in the world, of course. It was really important, I think, for us to stand with them. I mean, it was quite notable, the absence of people from the community in Fort McMurray to the evening event. We brought a lot of people in from Edmonton, and there were quite a number of First Nations activists there, but it was distressing to see that that community is not able to, maybe there's a great deal of fear or whatever, is not able to come around a challenge like this. And I think it's one of the issues that we have to deal with, because the people working in the tar sands are working men and women. They have families. These are the jobs that are open to them. A lot of them, I've talked to a lot of them, and they've said, we would prefer a much different kind of job. We need the jobs, but what we want, as much as everyone else, is a sustainable future. And one of the things that I'm most angry about with what industry and the big oil companies have done is the way they divide communities. And I think it's extremely important that we work as hard as we can to build those relationships. And it was just wonderful in Victoria to see the president of Communication, Energy and Paper Workers Union, Dave Cole, standing up on the podium in total solidarity with everyone else on that podium. There's so many things to talk about when we talk about the Harper agenda, and we obviously can't deal with all of them. And because I've been on this tour, and this tonight is part of it, I'm going to just stick to the issues that we're so deeply concerned around these pipelines and what we're dealing with. So I'm just going to remind us a little bit about what we're dealing with in the tar sands. Currently, there is a production of almost 2 million barrels a day of the dirtiest crude on Earth, the dirtiest oil on Earth, absolutely dangerous to ship anywhere, even around the corner. It occupies an area bigger than Scotland, and releases, of course, much more greenhouse gas emissions than does regular conventional oil. If Alberta were a country, it would have the highest per capita carbon footprint in the world. James Hansen, the noted environmental scientist at NASA, says that if we allow the tar sands to continue to grow at the rate they're growing, it will be, quote, game over for the climate. They keep the poison water that they destroy in this process in great big lakes, 170 square kilometers of toxic sludge and toxic lakes. And these lakes leak 11 million liters of toxic water every single day into the groundwater, into the local area. They are the tar sands are making the water, the people, and the land sick. And yet the expansion plans are absolutely incredible. The industry, backed by subsidies at different levels of government, are planning to expand by $40 billion over the next 5 years, and to build 14,000 kilometers of new pipelines that will add an additional 3.1 million barrels a day of this dirty crude, of this bitumen, and to be sent to export around the world. This is not for domestic use. It was very interesting. I did an interview with CBC today, and he said to me, "Might get an opinion," because I kind of strongly expressed my opinion, right? So we kind of laughed about it. But he said, you know, but what about oil for our use? And I said, this is not oil for our use. This is not energy for domestic use. This is all for export. This is all about, and it's not for jobs or local economic development. This is for profits for the companies. In BC, we're dealing with a plethora of dangerous proposed new pipelines or expanded pipelines. The Northern Gateway would cross through 800 rivers and streams and put 220 supertankers into the Great Bear Sea for the very first time. These are supertankers that are as long as the Empire State Building is high, and some of them would be carrying more oil than was carried on the Exxon Valdez. The Kinder Morgan, of course, the one that we're fighting closer to here, would cross 98 streams and rivers, already goes through Jasper Park, so the expansion would too, of course. And the twinning or expansion of the Kinder Morgan would add 360 supertankers to the Burrard Inlet. Driving over this morning in the dark, it was still dark when we came over the Lionsgate Bridge, we all, Bill and some of our group from our organization in the car just looked down at the beautiful water and all the lights around. I mean, this is where this is where so many people live, and to think that they could conceivably put super tankers in that area is just, it's breathtaking. It makes you realize that the farther you are away from the people who live anywhere, then it's important to remember that most of these corporations live very far away. The CEOs don't live anywhere near any of these pipelines. That nobody matters. It's out of sight, out of mind to them. And I don't want us to forget the Pacific Trails. Together with these gas lines, there are other gas lines that are proposed. They're talking about bringing massive amounts of fracked gas from northeastern British Columbia and Alberta also to be shipped away in tankers. Last night we had a wonderful young First Nations leader whose name is Caleb Ben with us in Burnaby, and he just showed, he comes from northeastern British Columbia. He showed a PowerPoint showing what's happening in his area and the devastation to the land and the water with this just free-for-all fracking. He said there are camps up there of 1,000 men, lots of them, just sort of hidden away in the woods, just pulling that gas out of the ground relentlessly and leaving huge amounts of destroyed water in their wake. And we're talking, of course, about LNGs, liquefied gas terminals up and down the coast. The first one, the license has been given to the first in Kitimat. And I think if we take all of this together, this sort of perfect storm of this dirty, dangerous bitumen, this fracked gas, and the water devastation it leaves behind, and the notion of putting them in tankers in some of the roughest water in the world, we're looking at a perfect storm for devastation for British Columbia's coast. And some of us are talking about the thought that British Columbia is becoming Canada's carbon corridor, and I think we need to see the future that is being presented to us here for British Columbia. It's the counterpart to what's happening in Alberta, and it's certainly all the expansion of the highways, all of that, the hydro lines, all of this is in attendance to transforming British Columbia into this carbon corridor. Spills, when they say that they're going to make better pipelines, we cannot believe one word of it. Last year, the federal regulator, when there still was one, at the federal level, did a study and said there were gaps and deficiencies in 2/3 of Canada's pipelines. In Alberta alone, there have been over 6,500 spills in 20 years, and there have been over 4,000 spills, oil spills in Canada's water in the years between 2007 and 2009 alone. So we need to understand, I think, what it is that we're facing here, and it needs to give us a determination that just simply put, these pipelines cannot be built. We just simply cannot allow it to happen. Now, I want to look then in terms of this situation and what this conference is about, which is the Harper agenda. And I think we need to be very clear in our minds who this man is and what this agenda is about. This isn't just somebody who doesn't care about the environment. That would be to miss the point. This is someone who has spent a long time preparing to be a majority prime minister and who has a plan for Canada. And if you look back at his history, he was the head of the National Citizens Coalition, which is an extremely right-wing fringe group, way out on the fringe of the right wing in our country. It was created to fight public health care. The creator, the man who founded it, Colin Brown, was a health insurance salesman, used to say that public health care would kill millions of Canadians. And they have stood against every progressive idea, every social program, every program for immigrants and refugees. My God, they're against the post office. I mean, if you can imagine. This is the most retrograde, right-wing, backward organization in our country, and Stephen Harper, our Prime Minister, came out of that organization. Well, what he has in mind, and it's not very hidden, is that he wants Canada to be an economic superpower, but he wants it to be an economic superpower through being an energy superpower and also through being a mineral and mining superpower. And he is removing every single obstacle in the way to that happening. It's not that he doesn't care about the environment, it's in the way. Environmental regulations are a problem in the way of moving to the goal that he wants. As Chief White pointed out, he has eviscerated or killed altogether an amazing array of environmental programs. He's cut scientists and staff in huge numbers at Environment Canada, at Parks Canada. Our parks are not being protected anymore. At Natural Resources, at the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. In fact, the Department of Fisheries and Oceans has admitted that they cannot fully, not even fully, they cannot at all do any environmental assessment on Northern Gateway, because they say we just don't have the staff. We just don't, all our habitat inspectors have been laid off, and we, alas, cannot do even what we're still required to do under the law. As Chief White said, they have gutted the Fisheries Act. They gutted the environmental assessment process. They've recently gutted the Navigable Waters Protection Act, so that except for a handful of rivers that they've chosen to be secured to some extent, the other 32,000 lakes in this country are going to be absolutely exempt from any challenge to any pipeline going through them, and this will include pipelines for mining as well. So we need to understand, I mean, they've killed the environmental, or plan to kill the environmental lakes area, which is that wonderful experimental area in northern Ontario, where we have had scientists studying for decades what makes water sick and how to make water better. This is how we discovered what mercury does. This is where we discovered what acid rain does and how it works and how to stop it. This is a very, very small budget. This is all about killing the messenger, because the scientists there are beginning to have very serious statements and very serious research about what the tar sands are doing, what our mining and fracking operations are doing to the water of Canada. They just want those voices shut down. I was part last summer of a march on Ottawa called The Death of Evidence. We had 2,000 scientists up on Parliament Hill taking a big chance, because a lot of them work for the government. Maybe not anymore, because they're just so relentlessly being let go. But the chant was no science, no evidence, no proof, no democracy. If you kill the science, if you kill the independent evidence, you kill the ability to make independent decisions. And I have at home a report that's that thick that just shows all the science-based institutions and programs that this government has shut down. So that's what they're doing on one hand. On the other hand, they are passing and negotiating free trade and investment agreements really so fast, unlike any other government in the history of our country, that are giving away rights to foreign corporations to our resources in a way that will be permanent and almost impossible to undo. There's the Canada-European Union CETA, Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement. This is going to have an investor-state provision, which is where the corporations from Europe will be able to challenge any the government of Canada if any other level of government brings in new rules or new legislation to protect the environment or health or whatever. The same kind of rights that American energy companies now have operating in the tar sands, for instance. Under Chapter 11 of NAFTA, if dream along, the government of Alberta were to suddenly say, we're worried about water, we're going to tell you you have to cut your water use in half, they would be able to all the corporations would have to obey it, but the American corporations, because of NAFTA, would have the right to sue for billions of dollars of compensation. And in fact, more recently, they're using these trade agreements to actually claim for the actual water. So we have a company called Abitibi-Bowater, that's a pulp and paper company that operated for decades in Newfoundland, went bankrupt a few years ago, left, and then sued, or well, told the government of Newfoundland it owed them money for the water rights it left behind, and the premier was then Danny Williams. And as you can imagine, Danny Williams told them where they could put that little thought, right? So they challenged the Canadian government under Chapter 11, and without even defending Newfoundland, the Harper government turned around and gave them $130 million. Now, what that means is that we now have an established precedent in our country and in North America under this agreement that, that these corporations can actually claim to own the water, which means that all the energy companies from the US and then any that from Europe, after this CETA is passed, if it passes, can claim to own the actual water water they need to use in the tar sands. The one we're currently very concerned about is an agreement that was signed quietly, and we just found out the terms very, very recently, called the Canada-China FIPA, Foreign Investment Protection and Promotion Agreement. What these FIPAs are, they're agreements between countries that they will, quote, protect the investments of the corporations from each other's countries. But here's what it could mean here, and it's not because it's China, but we have a situation where the state-owned energy company of China, so it's not a separated, it's the state-owned arm of the energy arm of a superpower, is wanting to take over one of the major energy companies in the tar sands. If that's allowed to go through, and we are not able to stop this signing of this FIPA, and it's not even due to go to a vote or to a debate in the House of Commons, and totally, completely, profoundly undemocratic, what will happen is that this company will buy into the tar sands believing that these pipelines are being built. And if the current government in BC or a future government in BC turns around and says we don't want those pipelines, they will have the right to sue, backed by a superpower, their superpower that owns them, to sue for billions of dollars. It's going to, we're giving away control of our natural resources. And by the way, this goes for our minerals, this goes for our fish. The CETA is putting our fish stocks at great risk because they're demanding total and complete access, equal access. They don't want to be treated as foreign companies. They want to be able to come in and buy the quotas up and so on. So let's be very clear what we're dealing with here. In the tar sands, more than 2/3 of the production is controlled by foreign corporate interests. And here you have the government of Canada not only dismantling 50, 60 years of environmental regulation and environmental infrastructure and the social security that should go around that, and on one hand, in signing these trade agreements, it just basically removes the ability of domestic governments to do anything about it. On behalf of foreign energy companies. That's what he's doing, and that is a very clear, deliberate policy. This is who this man serves, and we need to be very clear and articulate in our language around him, and be very clear-eyed in what we're dealing with. When Harper got the majority at first, I remember being quite devastated, as a lot of us did, and a lot of us felt that that election wasn't a particularly honest election. And we're going to court with some applicants in December around great concern around many thousands of calls that people got telling them to go to a voting booth that didn't exist. And we'll see what comes out of that. I mean, we cannot prejudge it, but we are very, very concerned. We should all be very concerned about the potential level of fraud that happened in the last election. But the day after, I remember feeling, as we all did, how could we have done this? How could this have happened? And I felt kind of overwhelmed. I don't feel that way at all now. I feel very energized, and I can tell you that traveling across this province and feeling the passion about stopping this agenda, particularly in this particular fight around the pipelines, there's an energy coming off the ground. There's an energy coming from young people. There's an energy coming from groups that haven't been involved before, like the 2,000 scientists who marched on Parliament Hill. And I feel that we're beginning to put together the seeds of a very, very powerful movement in this country that's going to do more than just take the country back from Stephen Harper, but that is in the process articulating what kind of vision we do want for our future. On the pipelines, I just want to say here are my thoughts about how to win this. First of all, we have to build huge resistance, and we have, because I received this very beautiful gift from a wonderful glass artist in thanks for the work we did on Blue Communities. I didn't want it to overshine anything else, but normally I have a little blue teardrop as well. We're building a symbol in British Columbia. The teardrop, the blue drop, is going to become I think here what the red square became in Quebec, which is the symbol of resistance, in this case resistance to the pipelines, but it's resistance to a whole agenda. So we need to build the resistance. We need to bridge all of the fights. It's really important that we not think of the pipeline separately and say, well, I'm going to fight this one and you worry about that one. And we need to include the fracking fights as well, because out of sight, out of mind, what is happening, it's not out of sight, out of mind to the people who live there, but for the large population centers, what's happening up in the Horn Valley and surrounding area up in northeastern British Columbia is nothing short of a crime against humanity. There's a wonderful man named Cormac Cullinan. He wrote a book called Wild Law. He's an environmentalist and human rights lawyer, expert in Cape Town, South Africa. And he says that he believes that future generations will look back on our generation and the way we've treated the earth, the way we look on slavery, and think it's just inconceivable that any group of people could have treated another group of people that way. He says future generations will look and say, how could we have treated the earth that way? But of course, if you remember that, those places are inhabited, but they're inhabited by First Nations, small communities, indigenous peoples, peasants. This is happening all over the world. There is slavery going on too. It is a form. It is very similar to former slavery when you take away the health of the waters and the air and the wildlife for the people who depend on it. So I think the slavery image continues to exist even to our day. And I want to say as strongly as I can, and this has been really remarkable in the tour around British Columbia and in Fort McMurray, and that is, it's not just that we need to be in solidarity with First Nations, but I want to reiterate what Chief White said, and that is that as the Harper government dismantles the infrastructure and the tools, removes the tools that we have had to fight this, and he brings the provinces into free trade agreements that tie their hands, and as he starves the municipalities and says the only way you can get federal money is if you move to private models like water and others, as that happens, the level of government that has any teeth left is that level of First Nations who have those treaty rights, who have the rights under... They have those rights under the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. I mean, these are fundamental rights, and they have never been ceded. And when we demand of the premiers, as we are of Christy Clark, that they turn around and say to Harper, you cannot bring in this Canada-China FIPA because you're actually violating the constitutional rights of the provinces over resources and environmental regulation. Similarly, it violates the Constitution and the constitutional rights to be of free, prior, and informed consent of First Nations people. So we need to not only build solidarity, but we need to take leadership from and hear the leadership of those First Nations voices. And we have to build solidarity with the fight that's continuing on in the United States. The Keystone Pipeline, they're still building. There are 4 people. Yesterday there were 2, and 2 sneaked through and got up in the trees. There are 4 people living in trees in Texas, and literally putting their lives and their bodies on the line. Other people have been arrested. It was a really brutal showdown going between the thugs that work for the Canadian company, TransCanada, and the local people in this community. And we have been sending messages of solidarity, and they have asked me to send messages of solidarity back on the struggle here in British Columbia to you, because it is one fight. We are one people. So I'll just end by saying that I am energized. I am excited by the fight that's coming up, and it is. And I think, as I said earlier, that it's not going to be just against something, but it is turning into a real examination of who we are and what kind of an economy we can build if it's not built on the destruction of our earth. And I think we're going to have to stand up around these pipelines. We're going to have to say to these giant transnational corporations, backed by the Harper government, if not openly backed by the Clark government, certainly it's a wink, wink, nod, nod. And we know that the forces that be are continuing to really place a pressure on the pipelines to be built, because the pipelines are the bloodlines of the tar sands. If we could stop the pipelines, you can't expand, there's no point in expanding the tar sands, but if we allow the pipelines to be built, there will be a relentless pressure to continue to keep them flowing and flow. I mean, when you spend billions of dollars on a pipeline, even good governments are going to continue to send that stuff through them. And so therefore you set the stage for a 3, 4, maybe 5-fold increase in the tar sands. It's just not the future for Canada. It's just simply one that we cannot abide. So when those pipeline trucks, when those energy companies come through our communities, we are just going to say to them, as Gandalf says in Lord of the Rings, you shall not pass. Thank you so much.